Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. It is Bonfire Night in the UK. Millions of us will be donning our scarves and coats and braving the cold weather to go and watch the fireworks and get warm by the bonfire. My personal favourite is the food. Hot dogs, burgers and hot chocolate, before finishing it all off with a sticky toffee apple. This night though, while beautiful, does put me on edge. Out of respect for my family, I cannot advise exactly what happened, but I do know firsthand how dangerous and deadly fireworks and gunpowder can be. To put you all in the loop who don't know what Bonfire Night is, I'll give a little recap. The year is 1605. A young Yorkshireman known as Guy Fawkes was recruited by Robert Catesby to join in a plot with 11 other conspirators. The plan was simple. Using Guy Fawkes' knowledge of gunpowder, the men would store barrels and barrels of the stuff in an undercroft, right under the House of Lords. Their plan was to set off the gunpowder during the state opening of Parliament, the only guaranteed time that the Protestant King James and members of his immediate family would be in attendance. With the king and his lineage disposed of, the men would then capture the king's daughter, who was not permitted to enter the House of Lords, and put her on the throne. The young Princess Elizabeth, not to be confused with King Henry's daughter, was only 9 years old at the time, and her accession would force the family to appoint a regent to govern for her until she came of age. It was hoped that as a child she was impressionable, and the conspirators knew that with a little guidance from them, with one of them being the regent, she would able to be converted to Catholicism and bring the monarchy back under Catholic control. But on the night the plan was to take place, and following a tip-off, a search was conducted in the undercroft. There, with a lantern and some matches, stood Guy Fawkes, and under some tinder, 36 barrels of gunpowder. What happened to Guy Fawkes afterwards was not pleasant, but the jailer's actions did force a confession from him. Years later, people would build effigies to Guy Fawkes and put them on top of bonfires on the anniversary of the event. The only few exceptions to the rule included the village of Scotton, a stone's throw away from where I live, who, out of respect for the village lad, did not see this tradition through. So the use of gunpowder has been around for many, many years before the railways. It seemed a done deal to move the gunpowder around the railway network, as it was the quickest way to transport it. But with a metal-on-metal fire-breathing spark-producing machine at the very front, just how did the railway do it safely? Right from the start, knowing that steel on steel created sparks was at the forefront of the wagon's design. The first wagons were made of wood, with the gunpowder safely encased in casks, similar to the type Guy Fawkes used. To prevent sparks from the engine setting fire to the wood casks, should a stray spark enter the wagon, the casks were covered with thick wool. Wool, in its purest form, is very flame retardant and has an ignition point of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We know that in 1850 restrictions were being placed on the movement of gunpowder following a report made following an accident on the Glasgow, Paisley, Kilmarnock and Ayr Railway. In the report, a slow goods train from Glasgow was found to be carrying more than just standard goods. It was established that, unknown to the railway, hidden among the usual goods under woolen ropes, several casks of gunpowder had made its way aboard, thanks to a carrier that failed to declare them. Thanks in part to a wayward spark, the unexpected cargo exploded, damaging several wagons. In the investigation, the railway was found to have not implemented extra precautions. The railway itself, according to its own bylaws, was going to charge the carrier, but considering the railway was going to sue them for the damage to the wagons anyway, it was decided not to enforce it. The London and North Western Railway also fell foul to gunpowder, but through more innocent means. Its 10:35 p.m. slow goods train from Millthorpe had 24 wagons of varying goods, ranging from salt to gunpowder. The lead-lined iron van was situated third from the engine and carried nearly 2 tons of gunpowder on board, with harmless salt in front and behind it. The problem was not caused from any mishandling of the gunpowder itself. Moreover, a stroke of bad luck, as the wagon in the front of the gunpowder van derailed while the train climbed an incline. The salt wagon mounted the bank, and to the horror of the crew, the gunpowder wagon broke away from the stricken van and started to roll. The wagon and the remainder of the train didn't go far, as the wagons behind the gunpowder van had also derailed and piled up behind, fouling the up line. The North Western Railway might have gotten away with just a pile-up if it wasn't for the second goods train on the up line. The driver simply had no time to react, only to blow his whistle in alarm as his engine slammed into the van. The explosion was so strong that the engine and its crew were thrown into the air and thrown onto a bank. The crew, who were quite literally on top of the explosion, sadly didn't survive. 11 of the 24 wagons were obliterated. The guard at the back of the stricken train, almost by the grace of God, survived with only mild injuries and an extreme case of shock. The cause was found further down the line, as several plates were found, parts of the suspension spring on the afflicted salt wagon. The Royal Gunpowder Mills at Waltham Abbey was already established in creating gunpowder and had been making it for many years, but because of its volatile nature, the factories producing the raw materials were spread far apart to avoid cross-contamination. To move the materials around, a wooden tramway was constructed using hand-push carts and wagons. As demand grew, it was decided to replace the wooden tramway with something more permanent and powerful. A new 18-inch gauge railway was constructed, which ran around the site. The paraffin-driven engine would pull specially designed wagons with bronze wheels which were resistant to sparking. After the Second World War, the line fell into disuse until the late 20th century, where the line was rebuilt for visitors. In 1930, the Railway Clearinghouse produced what became the industry standard in gunpowder wagon design and was adopted by 3 of the Big Four and the Royal Ordnance factories. The gunpowder wagons would be made entirely of metal with smaller bodies and balanced on 2 axles. The interior was wood-lined and were held in place with either brass or copper fittings, with only authorised staff allowed to open the wagon doors. The staff were only allowed in wearing special overboots which were made using no nails. This ensured the staff wouldn't create any sparks from spilt gunpowder. The vans were treated with great care in the shunting yards and were marked with an X or brightly coloured and a cast iron plate advising staff of its dangerous cargo. The placement of the wagon on the train was also important. The wagon was strictly not allowed to be directly behind the engine, and barrier vehicles had to be placed either side of it, and the brake van protecting the crew and the guard. The only place that the gunpowder vans were strictly banned was crossing through the Severn Tunnel, for obvious reasons. The practice of moving explosives carried on well into the 1960s, where the vans were now modified to be brake-fitted. By 1980, British Rail was only moving 10% of chemical traffic, and instead of using barrier wagons in the form of old rolling stock, purpose-built air brake wagons were created. These wagons were designed and braced at the ends, and these would only be used on the most dangerous loads, including the movement of gunpowder. But with the closure of Speedlink, the movement of this type of freight slowed to a crawl. There are still remnants of the gunpowder trade around the railway. The National Railway Museum has an original overboot in the warehouse, and Didcot Railway have an actual gunpowder van. The van with its telegraph game of cone is an example of the Great Western would have used. The van is currently being restored and is hoped to run again soon. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about gunpowder, then the Gunpowder Mill is definitely worth a visit. And if you're about and celebrating this Bonfire Night, I hope your celebrations are happy and safe.